What is up, guys? We're back with more picks and predictions. We had a 1 week break after UFC 314, which went amazing. This exact video went 12 for 13 for UFC 314. This weekend, we got UFC in Kansas City, headlined by Garry and Carlos Prates. I'm excited to break down every single fight on this card. So without further ado, let's get right into the picks and predictions for UFC Kansas City. All right, kicking off the card, we have an absolutely terrible fight in Chelsea Chandler versus Joselyne Edwards. I'm not going to waste too much time on this. Joselyne Edwards should be able to kind of win this fight wherever it goes. I think that if Chelsea Chandler somehow ends up on top of Edwards, she might be able to just keep her there and, win the round. But outside of like some weird trip, allowing Chelsea Chandler to, gain that position, I don't think she's going to be able to take Joselyne Edwards down. And I think on the feet, Edwards going to be quick. She's going to jab her up. I don't think this is going to look really that close. Chelsea Chandler, she's probably a bit stronger. She looks a little bit on the spectrum too, so maybe she has some of that power coming in. But I mean, outside of that, like Joselyne Edwards should be good everywhere here. This fight definitely goes a distance. I think over 2.5 is like -4, 500. Feel free to add that, to be honest. I mean, shit value, but I'd be surprised if either of these two finished the others. So Joselyne Edwards is going to be the pick. Fairly straightforward. She's going to be quicker. She's going to be on the feet. And I don't think Chandler's going to really have anything for her in this matchup. Next fight up, we got Timmy Cuamba versus Roberto Romero. And I think this is a pretty tricky one to call, actually. Both these guys are looking for their first win inside the UFC. Timmy Cuamba 0-2 in the UFC so far, coming off a loss to Lucas Almeida. And Roberto Romero 0-1 in the UFC, coming off a loss to David Onama, who's further up on this card, actually. And I mean, look, this is a pretty close fight. I think that, if the fight looks pretty, Timmy Cuamba, I think, is, the cleaner, slightly more technical guy. If they can stay out at Timmy Cuamba's range, he's probably going to be able to dot up Roberto Romero. But that being said, if this fight looks ugly, if Roberto Romero gets in Cuamba's face, I kind of favor Romero on that side, just in the dirty boxing, the Mexican chin. Roberto Romero's durability, I think, is slightly better. Even though Cuamba's super durable, Cuamba's a tough guy. I just think that, in that like out grit type of matchup, you're going to see Romero win that one slightly on the scorecard. So, I mean, look, like I said, I think this is a very close fight to call. Split decision here would not surprise me, but I just think that, Roberto Romero, I think he's going to be able to go get up in Timmy Cuamba's face, maybe even a timely takedown or two for Roberto Romero, possibly. I can see that happening. I think that, if one of these guys is going to get wobbled, it's going to be Cuamba in this fight. So I'm going to go with Roberto Romero to just, out-grit Timmy Cuamba. But this is an interesting fight. It's a close fight, and I wouldn't be surprised, Timmy Cuamba being 0-2 inside the UFC, coming out strong for this one, fighting for his roster spot. So that is something to keep in mind. But I'm going to lean Romero. I'm realistically not going to play this fight, though. Maybe some prop on the scorecards or something like that if I do find one that I think is cool. But yeah, at the moment, no bet on this fight. Probably not going to bet this fight. I think it's a really close one, really hard one to call. And let's move on to the next matchup. Up the card, we got Jaqueline Amorim versus Polyana Viana. And, this fight, fairly straightforward. Amorim, she's probably going to get Viana to the ground and do whatever she wants with her on the ground. I think she subs her up, too, in this fight. The line for this fight has kind of run like crazy. Obviously, if you guys sign up for premium on kopicks.win, you can check out our bets where we actually took action on Jaqueline Amorim over 10 days ago at -350 odds. She's now sitting at -800, so the line is fairly unplayable, but pretty confident that Amorim gets this one done. Viana, she probably has stuff for Amorim on the feet, but Amorim is a pretty smart fighter. She's going to be able to get this to the ground, and, she has extremely high-level jiu-jitsu once it goes there. So I think Amorim gets this one done with her grappling, and let's move on to the next matchup. All right, this next matchup is going to be a really fun one to watch. We got Cameron Saaiman versus Malcolm Wellmaker. Wellmaker's making his UFC debut after a really good performance on his Contender Series fight. He had a really nasty counter right hook KO in his Contender Series matchup, and, he's looked good. He's 8-0. He's 30 years old, so, started his MMA career a little bit later on, but, dude, he's an absolute finishing machine. And Cameron Saaiman on the other side, he had some hype coming into the UFC, but had a couple back-to-back losses here and there. Now Christian Rodriguez beat him, top fraud checker in the UFC, and then Payne Talbot beat him right after that. And obviously Payne Talbot, super hyped, but he did get bodied by Raoni Barcelos, so a little bit less hype on Payne Talbot. That loss isn't aging as well as potentially it could be. So keep that in mind. Now in this matchup, I got Wellmaker, and I think that Wellmaker can be quicker on the feet. I like Wellmaker's reach advantage in here as well, especially with the way he counter strikes. I think that, he can definitely take advantage of that reach. If Saaiman's trying to kind of lunge in towards him, I think Wellmaker can, hit a very similar counter. Happened to Saaiman against Peyton Talbot as well, where Saaiman, kind of lunged in. Wellmaker, I think he can catch him coming in. I like the reach. I like the speed. And I like the striking. I also think that Cameron Saaiman, you'll see that he keeps his chin up quite a bit. So I just think that, the knockouts there. I think the big moments are there for Wellmaker in this fight. I like Wellmaker's output as well. Overall, I just think that, Malcolm Wellmaker is a better striker, and I don't see this fight realistically going to the ground. So, yeah, I like Wellmaker in his UFC debut to get it done. I think he goes to 9-0. And, yeah, I think this is a pretty good matchup, though. Cameron Saaiman, pretty tricky UFC debut to kind of walk into. So, not someone to just brush off right away. Cameron Saaiman is, fairly good. He does have a couple wins in the UFC himself. But, Christian Rodriguez, Peyton Talbot, and, C-Rod, C-Rod's good, but he's obviously not top level UFC caliber. So in that context, I got to go with Wellmaker. I think he gets this one done. Could knock him out, could go all the way. But yeah, I'm going with Wellmaker. Next fight up, we got Blackshear versus Alatengheili, and I wish I could bring you guys some really hot takes on some big underdogs, but realistically, there's no reason to pick against Blackshear in this matchup. He should have every advantage going into this fight. He's bigger. He has the reach advantage. I think he's quicker. He should be better slightly on the feet. He's definitely better on the ground. He's also a little bit younger. Everything is kind of going for him. He has the experience advantage. Alatengheili has, a couple UFC wins, but not against any real high caliber opponents. His best UFC win was probably freaking Chad and Helliger, who's not good. Clayton Rodriguez was his last win. That guy's no longer in the UFC, I'm pretty sure. Hasn't fought since. And Blackshear, I feel like he can just kind of go up in there and sub him up. He has some pretty competitive fights with people like Mario Bautista. That's not the level of comp that Alatengheili is kind of going up against. So I'm gonna go with Blackshear to win this. I think he subs him up. I think he's one step ahead everywhere. The line probably makes sense for this matchup. And yeah, let's move on to the next one. Next fight up, we got Chris Gutierrez versus John Castaneda. And once again, close odds. And I guess the fight can play out pretty close, but it's hard to pick against Chris Gutierrez in this one. On the feet, I think, Chris Gutierrez is much more technical. He has more weapons. He throws that leg kick really effectively. He's going to chew up John Castaneda's leg in this fight. So in a kickboxing match, Chris Gutierrez is beating John Castaneda all day. Obviously, John Castaneda's advantage here is if the fight goes to the ground. He's going to want to get this fight to the ground. But is he going to be able to, out-grapple Chris Gutierrez enough to win, 2 out of 3 rounds on the scorecards? Or is he going to be able to sub up Chris Gutierrez? It's just kind of hard for me to see that, so I'm going to have to lean towards Chris Gutierrez and pick him to win this fight. It's going to be interesting, though. I think Chris Gutierrez has to kind of, get John Castaneda to go backwards here. If Castaneda can come out and, impose his will, especially on the wrestling side, then he's going to see success, but hard to kind of pick that's going to happen against someone like Chris Gutierrez. I think Gutierrez is good to go to get this one done, probably on the cards. I think he, like I said, keeps the fight standing, stays on the front foot, and just, uses those leg kicks, uses his technical striking to kind of beat John Castaneda up over 3 rounds. So Chris Gutierrez is going to be the pick. Let's move on to the next matchup. Up next on the card, we got Evan Elder versus Gage Young. Once again, I'm going to go with the favorite here, Evan Elder. I think the bookies got a lot of this card right. I said that about UFC 314 and I was right, so I'm going to go with my gut again. No dog chasing. If you think the favorite's going to win, you're going to have to pick it. Going with Evan Elder. There's a few things going for him in this matchup and a few things going against him. I think he's a better boxer for sure. We've seen really good boxing from Evan Elder in his last couple matchups, and I think that, both these guys will carry power with them, so both these guys are there to land a big shot. They're both pretty gritty too, so maybe that big shot won't, put him out, but that big shot could get them wobbled. We saw Evan Elder lose to Nazim Sadikov because of a doctor stoppage, because of a bad cut. So, something like that, not out of the question with the amount of power they're going to be throwing at each other. But one thing about Evan Elder, I think he can mix it up better than Gage Young here. Potentially could go for a timely takedown if needed. I think this is going to look like a fire fight. It's going to look like a really fun fight to watch. So that's one thing. I also think that's why the odds are kind of tightening for this matchup. I think that while Evan Elder is probably the better fighter here, I think the way that both these guys fight, the rounds are going to look pretty close. They're going to be hard to score in this matchup. So I'm going to lean Evan Elder. I think he has a better boxing. I think he can also, shoot a timely takedown here and there to sway rounds. I don't know if he'll actually do that. But at the same time, Gage Young, lighter man skill. He's one weight class below Evan Elder. He's kind of, taking this fight up at welterweight. He is coming on short notice, not much to lose coming in here, playing with house money. And we see how, some fighters just do better with that low expectations, coming in short notice, expected to kind of lose, just going in there and leaving it all out there. Could be interesting. So Wouldn't be surprised if I see an upset here, but I'm going to lean Evan Elder to win this matchup, and let's move on to the next fight. All right, this next fight is probably the hardest fight to break down on this card, in my opinion, or at least one of the hardest fights. It's Matt Schnell versus Jimmy Flick. Now, Matt Schnell, dude, I would stay away from these odds with a 10-foot pole. Matt Schnell is like almost minus 300. He's like minus 250, and I think that's absolutely insane for the amount of danger there is in betting Matt Schnell in this fight. Matt Schnell has not won a fight in almost 3 years. That was against Sumit Erji. That was a great fight, but that was almost 3 years ago. He's 35 years old. I mean, he's fighting, Jimmy Flick, who's 34, so I guess age is not really an issue here. They're both basically the same age, but, Jimmy Flick, on the other hand, sub Malcolm Gordon a year ago. Then he lost to Nate Maness, but Nate Maness is really good, and, after that, Matt Schnell, 3-fight losing streak. Mateus Nicolau, really good fighter. Steve Erceg, we know who Steve Erceg is, and then he lost to Cody Durden about 7 months ago. Now, if this fight stays standing and, on the feet, Matt Schnell probably find a KO on Jimmy Flick at some point in this fight. I think that, Matt Schnell, we know what he's about. He's all action, all danger. We've seen Jimmy Flick get knocked out by Charles Johnson and Alessandro Costa. I would put Matt Schnell in that category of people that can knock out a Jimmy Flick, especially if this fight stays standing. The issue is, will this fight stay standing? I think that Jimmy Flick, on the other hand, if he comes out here like a mixed martial artist and he takes Matt Schnell down, it just flips, He can find a sub just as easy as Matt Schnell could probably find a knockout on him. Flick can find the sub on Matt Schnell. Now, Jimmy Flick has some pretty good submissions. He sub Malcolm Gordon. He sub Cody Durden. These are good people to sub. Obviously, the Cody Durden one was 4 years ago, so they're a little bit outdated, but there's some real danger on the Schnell, like betting on Schnell, at least in this matchup. I'm going to go ahead and... It's really hard to pick this one. I'm going to go ahead and pick fucking Jimmy Flick. Fuck it. I'm going to go with the underdog in this fight. I think that, he can get takedowns here. I don't see him not getting takedowns if he really wants to. So that's the one issue here on this Matt Schnell side. But if Matt Schnell goes out there and knocks him out, I wouldn't be surprised. But I think Jimmy Flick can mix it up, get takedowns. Maybe Schnell punches himself out and Flick doesn't go down. Maybe Flick gets him down, finds a submission. I think there's a ton of ways where, Flick can come out here and win this fight against Schnell. Schnell, great fighter, super fun to watch. Fighting against high-level comps, so that three-fight losing skid, it is what it is. Obviously, Cody Durden on the lower end of the comp. He's fighting Erceg and Nicolas, a really high-level comp in the flyweight division. But I'm going to have to go with Jimmy Flick here, the underdog. I think the odds are way too wide to touch Matt Schnell here. And, yeah, that's going to be the pick. Let's move on to the next matchup. I'm going to keep this next one fairly short. We got Ikram Aliskerov versus Andre Muniz. Ikram Aliskerov should kind of have him here all day long. Maybe this is like a Magomed Ankalaev, Paul Craig type of scenario. That's the only way that Andre Muniz could potentially win this. Muniz, good jiu-jitsu, but you know what they say. I mean, wrestling beats jiu-jitsu. Ikram Aliskerov has a wrestling advantage. He has way better hands than Andre Muniz. Every fight site, I don't even think that Ikram Aliskerov is going to shoot takedowns in this. He could just, kind of knock Muniz out on the feet here. And, Muniz, if he really needs to get this fight to the ground, Aliskerov is probably not the right person to just go all out wrestling against. So I'm going with Ikram Aliskerov to win this. I don't see, much of a threat coming back his way. Let's move on to the next matchup. All right, this next fight up, we got Randy Brown versus Nicolas Dalby. And Nicolas Dalby is one of those fighters. It's obviously kind of hard to bet against Nicolas Dalby, but I do like Randy Brown in this matchup, and I'll tell you why. When there's someone like Nicolas Dalby and, you have an opponent like Renat Fakhretdinov before, he kind of had like 2 really bad performances against Dalby and then Leal as well. You also have someone like Gabriel Bonfim who, super hyped up. I think he was undefeated at the time, if I'm not mistaken, Bonfim, and just like coming in to just kind of absolutely take Dalby's head off. In those scenarios, obviously, that's where Dalby can come alive because you have an opponent that's basically like overlooking you, and Dalby's not someone to be overlooked. But I think someone like Randy Brown, the reason why Randy Brown's pretty good in this spot is that he's got the experience. Randy Brown's not this like world beater. Randy Brown is comfortable going to, a 3-round decision. He knows he's not going to come out there and just take everyone's head off. So he's not kind of looking for that. He wants to win each round. He wants to go out there, pick up 2 out of 3. I think he can definitely do that against a Nicolas Dalby. I think he has a ton of advantages here. He's got the reach advantage. He's got the youth on his side. Both these guys, experience-wise, both these guys have fought pretty good fighters, been UFC level for a while. So that's kind of not really a problem. But Randy Brown with the reach, with the youth, I think he'll be a bit faster. I think he's a cleaner striker. And I think with Dalby's forward pressure, it will kind of play into Randy Brown's wheelhouse here because he can just kind of, dot him up on the way in. But Dalby's not gonna, he's not gonna quit. He will fight. So if you're on the Dalby side, I do understand that. But I think that in this fight, someone like Rude Boy has the exact tools needed. He has the exact mentality needed to kind of get a clean win over Nicolas Dalby here. So Randy Brown's going to be the pick. He's got the tools to get it done, and I trust him to go ahead and do that. Next matchup, we got Michel Pereira versus Abus Magomedov. This one's also a little bit tricky to predict just because of the way Michel Pereira looked in his last outing against Anthony Hernandez. But we know that Fluffy is super, super legit. He already beat Brendan Allen after that, after the Michel Pereira win. So Fluffy is super legit. He did get bodied by Fluffy though, like absolutely destroyed, which is one thing to note. But this is a 3-round fight, not a 5-round fight. Abus Magomedov, man, I just think he's a little bit slow. Don't really love his game that much. I think that on the feet here, he's not going to have shit for Michel Pereira. Michel Pereira's going to come out here, I think, like an absolute berserker. I don't see Michel Pereira being the type of guy to let that last fight kind of dictate the way he fights. I think he's going to come out here like an absolute berserker all over Abus Magomedov. I think Magomedov's going to want to shoot on Michel Pereira, and I don't think he's going to get Michel Pereira down. And I don't think Abus Magomedov is Fluffy Hernandez when it comes to the grappling. So I'm going to go with Michel Pereira, man. Obviously, this is not a super, super confident pick because of Pereira's last performance. That one's always going to be a hard one to kind of bounce back from. But I think he has the tools to beat Abus Magomedov. I think it can be tricky. But, yeah, man, I just don't see Abus really having anything for Pereira, at least on the feet. And do I see him, gassing Pereira out? I just don't know if Abus just has that in his tank. I don't know if Abus is the type of guy to just go out there and, just out-dog of Michel Pereira. So I'm going to go with Michel Pereira to win this one. Let's move on to the next matchup. All right, next fight up. I've been waiting to talk about this matchup. We got Giga Chikadze versus David Onama, and I'm all over the underdog here. I got Giga Chikadze beating David Onama this weekend. This is a big step up in competition for David Onama. Giga Chikadze is in the featherweight rankings. He has been fighting really tough competition in his career, and David Onama, 3-fight win streak, but Gabriel Santos, Jonathan Pierce, and then Roberto Romero, not the best comp. And in that, I've seen David Onama lose a round to JSP, and Jonathan Pierce not even in the UFC anymore, I'm pretty sure, not UFC caliber. And I know it's not a one-to-one comparison. He did lose that round, with a bunch of wrestling, a bunch of grappling. Giga Chikadze is not going to do that to David Onama, so I know it's not a one-to-one comparison. But it's just to kind of put into place like the caliber of fighter that Chikadze is facing, coming off a loss to Arnold Allen. And Arnold Allen is really good. Arnold Allen had a close fight with Movsar Evloev, who to a lot of people is the biggest threat to Alexander Volkanovski right now. And in that fight against Arnold Allen, Giga Chikadze won the first round. He lost the third round for sure, but that second round, while he did lose, it was competitive. So Chikadze, if he had a little bit more in the tank, could maybe have picked up that second round against Arnold Allen, and now he has a win over a really, really good fighter in the featherweight rankings, and things look different. So that's kind of the level of comp that Onama is stepping up against, and I just don't think he's ready. I don't think he can take Giga Chikadze down. I think this fight does stay standing. I think the one thing is Onama probably has a little bit more power. He's a little bit more live for a finish in this fight. Sure, I think that is true, but Giga Chikadze, man, I think he can stay at range. I think this is a type of striker that Onama is not ready for. I think the kicks will rack up. I think Chikadze is good to go. I think he's training hard, and I'm on the underdog here. I've seen this play out before. This jump up in comp, and Onama just has not shown me that he's ready. I think Roberto Romero also dropped him in his last fight 4 months ago. He did come out there and win that, pretty convincingly, but just I've seen the holes in Onama's game. I don't think he's ready for a Giga Chikadze, and I think that, Chikadze is a little bit better than people give him credit for. So I'm going to go with Giga to win this fight. I think he's about plus 145, plus 150 right now. Peaked at plus 160. I actually was on him way earlier when he was even lower at plus 130. So yeah, I kind of even should have waited a little bit on that. Maybe I'll add to it. I don't know. I'll take a look at the way my slip is looking this week. But yeah, man, I'm on Giga Chikadze. Let's move on to the next matchup. Up next, pretty straightforward breakdown in the co-main event. We got Anthony Smith and Mingyang Zhang. Mingyang Zhang, very dangerous on the feet, big power, coming off a knockout against Ozzy Diaz. Pretty big step up in comp, though, against Anthony Smith here. Anthony Smith, we obviously know he's been fighting top-level comp for years on end now. Coming off that loss to Dominic Reyes, and Dominic Reyes on the full resurgence. We picked Dominic Reyes to beat Nikita Krylov, and we were right. Dominic Reyes is back. The title run is on for Dominic Reyes. But, yeah, man, Anthony Smith lost to Dolidze, lost to Reyes. He's taken a ton of damage in his career, but Anthony Smith is still live for a fraud check here and there, and this could potentially be that. Mingyang Zhang, I just think the odds are insane for Mingyang Zhang right now. He's minus 500. I think that's pretty deep against an Anthony Smith who, if the fight extends, he can potentially go out there and get crafty. But the pick has to be Zhang. He has too much power, too big of a puncher. And Anthony Smith, dude, I'm praying he doesn't eat too big of a shot before he goes down. But I think Mingyang Zhang knocks him out. But if the fight extends and, shit gets crazy, I wouldn't be surprised. Staying away from these betting odds here, but Zhang is the pick. Let's move on to the main event. Next matchup, we got Carlos Prates versus Ian Garry, and great matchup. To be honest, if you're picking either side of this, I can understand it. I can understand why you're picking Garry. I can understand why you're picking Prates, but I'm going to be picking Carlos Prates. I'm not leaving the Fighting Nerds train just yet, and I get it. I think that on the feet here, Garry probably has more volume, but the danger is just like unimaginable on the Prates side. You don't really see Garry putting people out, obviously, you don't really see anyone putting people out the way you see Prates putting people out. So there's going to be a lot of danger on the feet for an Ian Garry. We've all seen Ian Garry get dropped by Hassan Kanan, seen him get wobbled a couple times. So Carlos Prates, man, he's not the one to be played with. That is on the feet. Now, obviously, Ian Garry, you were seeing a lot of talk here about Ian Garry. He's going to wrestle Prates, blah, 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 blah. The only person we've really seen Ian Garry do that to is Michael Venom Page. And Michael Venom Page, one of the most gifted strikers in the UFC right now, one of the best strikers in the UFC right now, but he does have pretty atrocious wrestling, a pretty atrocious ground game. He's good at not getting subbed, I'll give him that, but he does get controlled quite a bit. So I don't know if Prates is built the same way as Michael Venom Page. I don't think so. I don't think Prates' wrestling game is that weak. I think that he also knows that, coming into this fight against Ian Garry, obviously Ian Garry being a good striker, great striker himself, will want to mix it up though because of the danger coming his way. So I think Prates is aware of that. And I think that, 25 minutes against Prates, and I know people say 25 minutes in 5 rounds, it's a bad thing for Prates. I'm looking at it the other way around. I think that Prates just needs one shot to, finish you. And 25 minutes for him to find that shot, it's a long time. Every round starts on the feet. And I don't think Garry is this insane wrestler, insane grappler. I think he did it against MVP. Very smart, very high IQ, was able to impose it. I don't think he's all that when it comes to, being able to lay and prey on a Prates. So maybe Garry does get him to the ground. Maybe Garry does win some rounds here. And maybe Garry does win this fight. Both of these guys are really high level. Garry has proven to be, high level at against better comp than Prates has so far in his career. But Prates' best competition was Neil Magny, and what he made Neil Magny look like he didn't belong in there with him. So for all I know, Prates belongs with the top of this division. I'm going to go with Prates to win this fight. Like I said, I think 25 minutes with every round starting on the feet. That's a long time to give Prates that chance to find the shot. Ian Garry could definitely win this fight. He has the tools. I think Prates also does have the tools. We'll see how it plays out, but Carlos Prates is going to be my pick. And that does it for all the picks and predictions for UFC Kansas City. Thank you guys for tuning in this week. We went 12 for 13 on predictions last week, so if you do like what you hear, definitely hit that like button. Share the video with your friends. Hit subscribe. It helps the algorithm, helps us grow. We've been, putting in a lot of work in figuring out, the best way to break these fighters down. Like I said, did really well at UFC 314. One of the best, going 12 for 13. The only fight we missed was Yair versus Pitbull. And on top of that, if you do want to support the channel, do you want to, stay tuned and check out our bets for every single week. Check out kopicks.win for $20 a month, which, comes down to $5 per card. You can see our bet slip, our unit sizes, what spots we actually really like, where we are actually laying our chalk down for the week. So check that out on kopicks.win. Definitely join up on our Discord as well. Our Discord is absolutely free. And yeah, good luck to everyone for their bets on UFC Kansas City. We had a good week off. Let's hop right back into it and let's, steal some money from the sports books this weekend as well.